This is your class live recording for your Almost War in the Balkans for 20th century history. When talking about the Balkan Peninsula, you really need to understand the area that we're talking about. These are the Balkan states. We have Greece, kind of the former Ottoman Empire, Turkey, Bulgaria, Serbia, Montenegro, all that stuff going on here. So this is the region we're talking about when we're talking about the Balkans. Okay, this kind of Black Sea meets the Mediterranean Sea region. And the first thing you need to understand when talking about the Almost War is Balkan history. From an early period, the Balkans had been controlled by the Ottoman Turks. Now we're talking about, remember, during the time of the Roman Empire, excuse me, the empire split into East and West. The East is what became the Balkan or the Ottoman territory later on. So this has always been a society of different cultures. Remember, it was one of the centers of Christianity. It became one of the centers of Islam. So there is a lot of different cultures living here. We've got Armenian Christians, we've got Greek Christians, we've got Ottoman Turks, and just kind of a very big bunching of a lot of different people. Now, in 1821, we have the Greek Revolution. Now, I know this is a bit before our time period that we're talking about here, but there's a massive rise in nationalism and this nationalistic sense that, people of the same culture should be able to be in charge of their own state and nation. And this really takes hold in Europe and particularly in the Balkans, because we had this mishmash, hodgepodge group of folks living in these areas, and they kind of were realizing, this is our homeland, why do we not have control of it? And this was particularly important to the Greeks, who, in early classical times, were a world power. The ancient Greek culture and civilization is really upheld as kind of one of the greatest early civilizations in the world, and kind of a founder of democracy. And so a lot of these things come into play, and the Greeks were very proud and thought, we were once a world power, why can we not be again? And so there was the Greek Revolution in 1821, and Greece becomes its own country. So that's kind of where we're starting with our background history. The conflict really comes to a head in June of 1914, and the Greek, I believe he was the premier, said, "I do not wish to allow to escape me words which cannot be recalled. I should fail in my duty if I did not inform the Greek Parliament that the situation has become grave, indeed very grave." And so what's also happening in the summer of 1914 is we have the assassination of Duke Ferdinand, which really sets off World War I. But at the time, there had been this really stirring conflict in the Balkan region, excuse me, for quite a long time, because, again, these nationalistic feelings and the desire by the Ottoman Turks to kind of dispel Christians, and particularly Greek Christians, from the Ottoman Empire. So it starts out with Christian Turks being discriminated and beaten, and Muslim Greeks being discriminated and beaten, and so they're really both kind of playing both ends of the spectrum here. And it really focused on the Turkish city of Thrace, which historically was a Greek city. And the Greeks felt very strongly about this city because it was a central community in the Ottoman Empire that was populated by Christian Greeks. Now, remember, at this time, if you have kind of a Greek cultural center in the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottomans are saying, look, we're not so happy with this whole Greek thing, they start targeting these cities, seizing Greek lands, rape, pillage, plunder, that sort of thing. And so Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Montenegro, they unite and they launch an attack against the Ottoman Empire in what came to be called the First Balkan War. And this was before 1914. The alliance didn't work out. The Bulgarians didn't really get along with everybody else. But there was an initial push to free these other cultural groups so that they could become their own nation. And remember, at this time, Greece already was its own nation, but it really wanted to free a lot more of the Greek city-states that used to belong to it. Excuse me. And again, this focuses around Thrace and that sort of thing. So the conflict really comes to a head, particularly after the First Balkan War. And there's a Turkish distrust of Greeks and Christians. And so they start deporting them, which is kind of reminiscent of World War II. So, this removal of Christian Greeks from the western parts of the empire was actually part of this larger plan by the Turkish government to just remove all Christians. So, think of the Spanish Inquisition, where Spain expelled all Muslims and Jews from the country, so that would be a Catholic country. The Turks had the same plan, but so they wanted it to be a Muslim country. And really, we consider this kind of the first modern genocide because these people were taken into camps and kicked off their land, and again, rape and murder and pillage. And things didn't really get settled down between Greece and Turkey. They ended up on different sides during World War I, and so after the war, we actually ended up with a Greco-Turkish war. World War I ended in 1918. The Greeks and the Turks were not done with each other. Even after 4 years of fighting and really destroying Europe, they weren't done. There was still things to be had. And so, a lot of these issues didn't get resolved until after World War I. But really, what's kind of interesting to think about is that if this war, this almost war before World War I had started, how would World War I have played out differently? And so, yes, there were a lot of stirrings with Archduke Ferdinand and that sort of thing, but a lot of other nations in Europe were really ripe for war at this time. They were ready to start destroying each other. So it started out as an almost war in the Balkans, and it ended up as a full-blown war in 1919 over these issues. But initially, it got pushed aside because of World War I. They got sucked up into the alliances and that sort of thing. So that's it. That's your almost war in the Balkans that was prevented, particularly by World War I, but it ended up coming to fruition later. So that's it. If you've got any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in class.